So now we're going to get going. So what we're going to be doing today is a look at what techniques do we have, what tools do we have to understand behavior from a sort of experimental point of view. So we're going to take a look at, for example, today, how do we narrow down the questions that we ask? So in psychology, when you're trying to find the truth about the causes of behavior, trying to find the truth about how our mind works, you're basically trying to hit a bullseye on this target over here. And we can use techniques so we can narrow down where we think that target is to increase our chances of actually getting to the truth, getting to that target. If we don't use these techniques, then really what we're doing is just taking darts and randomly throwing them in all directions. And it might lead to one of them eventually hitting a target, but it would probably lead to a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted effort, and a lot of delay in actually helping people with our psychological discoveries. So we're going to see how you can use techniques such as deduction to narrow down where you point your efforts so that you can maximize your ability to make new discoveries in psychology. And we're also going to take a look at how you can make predictions about what should occur even before you run any experiments. So for example, let's say that you were interested in obsessive compulsive disorder. There is a ton of research that has already been done on obsessive compulsive disorder. There's a ton of research and theories about how obsessive compulsive disorder works. And let's say that you're also interested in the effects of hallucinatory drugs. There's tons of research on how do hallucinatory drugs affect your mind. And if you are interested in the interaction between hallucinatory drugs and obsessive compulsive disorder, you would probably find that that research hasn't been done yet. Maybe nobody has asked that question yet. And you might say to yourself, all right, maybe that would be a good place to start looking. And you should, even before you run any experiment, even before you run any test, be able to first establish that there should be a link between these two. So you can use deductive logic, which we'll go over today, to first show that there even should be a link between these two different phenomena. And then you can predict whether an increase in the use of hallucinatory drugs would cause an increase in obsessive compulsive disorder, meaning that the cause of obsessive compulsive disorder might share the same brain mechanisms that are affected by the use of hallucinatory drugs. Or on the other hand, the theories might lead you to predict that an increase in hallucinatory drug use would actually lead to a decrease in obsessive compulsive disorder, in which case you have the potential for a treatment for obsessive compulsive disorder. And we're going to see the techniques that you can use to make those predictions to kind of increase your chance of finding the truth without ever running a single subject. So this is all before you actually take a look at subjects to see what might actually be potentially discovered. I'll give you another example, one from positive psychology. So there's been a lot of research being done in the last while on happiness, on how to increase happiness, the effects of happiness, the importance of happiness. So there's a lot of research on what it is to live a meaningful life and have a contented existence. There's also a lot of research that's been done on intelligence. So this is the symbol for Mensa. This is one of the most well-known genius organizations. I think you need an IQ of 140 in order to qualify for Mensa. And there's been a lot of work done on the effects of intelligence. How does intelligence affect your life in other areas? And you might be asking yourself, well, what does intelligence have to do with happiness? Are the two of them related? And we're going to see that you can use, again, deductive tools to first off establish that there should be a link, right? So sometimes you'll use your deduction tools and you'll say, these two shouldn't be linked at all. There's no link between them in any of the literature. So why would we even investigate that? Other times you'll say to yourself, well, based on how intelligence works and how happiness works, the two of them should be linked. And then you'll be able to predict which way should that be linked? Does an increase in intelligence lead to an increase in happiness because you're more able to interact with the world, you're more able to correctly predict what might happen, you're more able to possibly control the outcome of your actions? Or alternatively, does an increase in intelligence lead to a decrease in happiness because you can't engage with people as easily, you can't identify with them as easily, you get isolated? Is that the actual outcome of higher intelligence? So all of that can be deduced, thought about, predicted before you even run a single subject. Importantly, before you invest any resources and time into investigating that potential area. All right, so that is the sort of stuff we're going to be looking at today. We're going to take a look at different ways of knowing, first off, to differentiate non-scientific approaches from scientific approaches. So we're going to take a look at approaches that are non-scientific, like intuition and authority. And then we're going to take a look at the scientific approach, skepticism, empiricism, and we're going to focus on induction and deduction, specifically deduction today. And we're going to have some in-class practice, which is the handouts that I went to go get. And then we're going to wrap up today with a very quick word about inferential statistics. This is going to be all the statistics that you're going to need to learn this semester so that you can understand the results of the in-class experiment. So the results of the in-class experiment are in. They've been combined with previous sections. And we're going to take a look at what happened when you tried to remember those lists of words in groups. Did people produce false memories? And how confident were they for those false versus true memories? All right, so ways of knowing. We'll start off with the non-scientific approach. This is, when we're talking about the non-scientific approach, they're not invalid ways of getting knowledge. They're not necessarily ways that should be avoided in terms of getting knowledge. Sometimes personal intuition is a great place to start in terms of getting knowledge. The problem is, though, that these are non-scientific approaches. So while they might help you along your journey to get to the truth, you can't take them as the way to get to what's really going on. You might have an intuition and say, oh my gosh, I think we should look at this. I kind of feel like this would be something that should be true. But they're not a scientific way of getting to the truth. They're not a reliable way of getting to the truth. And oftentimes, as we're going to see, they lead you away from the truth. So we'll start off with intuition. And intuition is when you accept unquestioningly, and that's the key to what I was just mentioning, unquestioningly, that's when it gets into a problem, your own personal judgment. So we all have intuitions about things. We all got feelings of things. We all have our opinion. But the problem comes when you accept those unquestioningly. When you decide that, my feeling about this is just the way that it has to be. Why should I question my own inner monologue, my own inner voice? And this intuition has kept people oftentimes from getting to the truth, oftentimes with detrimental effects. So one thing that resisted scientific advance because of intuition is things like the hazards of smoking. So there was a huge push about the hazards of smoking in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and continues on today. But it was very difficult to convince people about the hazards of smoking because of their own personal judgment. So it was very well established that there were risks of smoking. There was increases in lung cancer. There was increases in heart disease. There was a lot of scientific evidence that showed that smoking was very harmful, but a lot of people resisted that scientific evidence because of their own personal judgment. So one of the sources of your own personal judgment that sometimes leads to this belief of things that are untrue are things like anecdotal evidence. And this one is a huge one in our society today. So anecdotal evidence is evidence from a single story. It's evidence from a single instance. And one of the reasons why it was so difficult to convince people about the risks of smoking, about how smoking could shorten your lifespan, about how smoking could cause lung cancer, how smoking could cause heart disease. The reason for this was in just about every single family, they had one person who smoked 15 packs a day since the time that they were 5.5 years old, and they're currently 97, and they're as fit as a horse. There was always that one example that you could turn to, whether it's your grandfather, your grandmother, somebody survived. And that one story kept people from accepting the scientific evidence. It unduly influenced their own personal judgment, and you should never underestimate the effect of a single story. So this is especially important in today's world, where single stories are so incredibly easy to find. So I'll give you an example of another effect of intuition, another effect of this anecdotal evidence that has a lot of impact for our society, and that has to do with the Black Lives Matters movement. So the Black Lives Matters movement was about how black individuals, more specifically black males, were being disproportionately killed by police officers. There was more police brutality, there was more police violence against this one segment of the population. And what continuously appeared on news programs were these single stories. And it almost always seemed to be a white police officer that was unlawfully either unlawfully killing or unlawfully using force against a black individual. So there was a lot of this anecdotal evidence. And because of that, drives and initiatives and programs to fight this phenomenon, to fight this predicament, were focused on individuals. They were focused on sensitivity training. They were focused on racism awareness. They were focused on new strategies for individuals to deal with, minorities. They were focused on the individuals because those were the stories that people were seeing. Those were the anecdotal evidence that was there. So there was a lot of effort put into these programs. As it turns out, there's evidence that that is not the cause of this disproportionate violence against minority suspects. So this was a article that was published quite recently, and what they did was they looked at data for all confirmed use of lethal force by police officers in the United States in 2014 and 2015, and they did find that minority suspects are disproportionately killed by police officers. So there is that predicament, there is that problem, but we as psychologists need to say, how do we fix it? How do we get to the truth of what is causing it? And what they found was, here we go. They go that the vast majority of people killed by police are armed at the times of their fatal encounter, and more than 2/3 possess a gun. So people that are killed by the police, more than 2/3 of them possess a gun. And actually, I believe it was 99% of them are armed in some manner. So either with a knife, with a gun, with some sort of weapon, if they are involved in a police shooting. African Americans are disproportionately killed by police officers nationwide. So there is a problem, right? It's not like they're saying that there's no issue here. There is definitely an issue, but their conclusion was that it's not appeared to be driven by micro-level racism. Rather, it's a combination of macro-level public policies that target minority populations and meso-level policies and practices at police levels. So there's a lot of terms in there, but basically what it is macro level. When you're looking at sociological forces, macro levels are individuals. And what they found was that this was not an issue for individuals. It was not individual racism that was driving this effect. They found no difference in the number of the proportion of minorities that were shot by white officers versus the proportion of minorities that were shot by minority officers. There was no difference there. So all of that sensitivity training aimed at the individual was wasted. It was useless. It did not help this problem. What needs to be done is they need to take a look at the meso level, which is the community or organization policies of police. And they have to look at the macro level, the national society policies that officers have in order to address this issue. So this publication, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't hear about it, is an important way, it's a scientific way of understanding these stories are anecdotal evidence. And the reason that they're so powerful is because our minds are geared, they're made, they're programmed to understand stories. They're programmed to understand in single instances. They're programmed from years of evolution that if you walk into a forest and you see one wolf, there's probably other wolves around. So a single story has a lot of power, but we have to remember that that's intuition. That's just that one single story, and that's a non-scientific approach, and we can't let it drive our pursuit of the truth. We have to use scientific means, and in this case, they looked at aggregate data to get to a more truthful picture. All right, so any questions on anecdotal evidence and intuition? Mm-hmm.
What were the terminologies? Micro?
Oh, so it was micro level is the individual. Meso level would be the community or the organization. So that would be like the precinct or the police department. Macro level is national or society. So that would be the United States' approach to law enforcement in general. And what they found was that it wasn't this individual. It wasn't the attitudes of the individual, the racism of the individual towards minorities. That wasn't what was driving the disproportionate killing of minorities. It was these policies here and these policies here that were the contributing factors. All right, so that's intuition. Another way of non-scientific way of knowing is to rely on authority. And authority is, again, a fine place to start, but you can't rely on it. You can't accept it unquestioningly. And there's two reasons for that. Sometimes people that get in authority don't necessarily know or are experts in what they're talking about. So some sources of authority should not be trusted for things like climate change, right? They're not knowledgeable on those particular subjects. Another reason that authority is really kind of taken a nosedive in recent years is because people that are accepted as authorities has changed over the years. So if you go back a couple of decades and you watch news interviews, right, on TV, and they have something like, we're talking about the latest advances in treating. Let's go with autism. We'll go with the hot button issue. We're talking about the latest advances in treating autism, and we have, with us today on the panel, Dr. Smith, who received a PhD in child development from Stanford University, and she has 20 years of experience working in an autism center. She's joining us today for our discussion on autism. Welcome. That was a couple of decades ago. Today, same program. We're talking about treatments in autism. Today we have online blogger Joan with us. She has 100,000 subscribers to her blog, Mommy and Me, Autism, and let's see what she has to say. Authority has kind of taken a downturn, so it's really iffy to rely on authority. Again, it's a non-scientific approach to knowledge. All right, so those are the non-scientific ways. Fine to use them, don't use them unquestioningly. Fine to kind of start with those, but don't use them as the sort of end game towards getting towards the truth. You want to get towards the truth, you need to use scientific approaches. So scientific approaches, if you recall, non-scientific intuition was unquestioningly accepting things. Scientific approach will start off with the opposite of that, which is skepticism, which is to question things, to figure out how does this work, what does this really mean, where did this information come from. And we also have empiricism, which is looking at the world to see what's really going on. So in skepticism, ideas are based or evaluated on the basis of careful logic. So you take a look at the ideas and you say, do these ideas all make sense? Right? Do they follow a logical progression? Is there any contradictions in what they're saying? Are there any logical inconsistencies in what they're saying? You take a look at results from scientific investigations, right? So you go to the journals, you go to scientific publications, you go to studies, you don't go to non-scientific sources, and when we visit the library, we'll see how to find those scientific sources, but you evaluate ideas, and again, you question using careful logic, question using these scientific investigations. Empiricism is another scientific approach, and this is knowledge based on observations. And notice it's observations, not observation. Observation is anecdotal evidence. If you see one thing, that's anecdotal evidence. But if you see it 100 times, 1,000 times, if you see it multiple times, then you can see a pattern and you can get to the truth. So in that police study on the Black Lives Matter issue that I showed you, they looked at data of all, police homicides. Sorry, that's not the word. All, I forgot what the term was. They all uses of lethal force. There it is. They looked at all uses of lethal force, not just one, not just the ones that made it to the news, but all of them. They based their knowledge on those observations. And then the other one that we're going to take a look at today specifically is deduction, and the flip side of that, induction. And those are two forms of, again, ways of knowing that are based on, in the one side, logical, careful logic and skepticism, and induction is based on observation, more empiricism. All right, so let's get to induction and deduction. So again, induction based on observation, deduction based on logic. Induction is when you reason from a particular piece of data to a general theory. Deduction, on the other hand, is when you reason from general theory to a particular piece of data. So you'll notice that these two are flip sides of each other. So induction, you take a look at something and then you generalize to a theory. Deduction, you take a look at a theory and you generalize to a particular situation. So I'll give you an example of induction. So this is a simplified example. If you're critically thinking about what I'm presenting right now, you'll notice that this is anecdotal evidence. So again, we wouldn't accept this unquestioningly, but it is an okay place to start. So we have a single individual, and let's say that this is a friend of yours, and he paints, and he's a bit of an introvert, and he's good at solving problems, but he's also been breathing in a lot of fumes, so his cognition is a little bit slow. And what else do we have? He has low income because he's a starving artist, and he breathes in paint fumes. He's got slower cognitive functioning. He's great at problem solving. He's very creative. These are all things that you observe about this particular individual. Those are all pieces of data. So all those observations, all those facts about this individual here are pieces of data. Induction is when you reason from that data to general theories. So you might know that he is creative and he's a great problem solver. So you might induce from that and say, you know what, maybe creativity actually leads to better problem solving. Maybe those two are related. He's creative, he's good at problem solving. I'm going to induce this theory that creativity leads to better problem solving. And you might say to yourself, he's kind of introverted, and he's struggling as an artist, he has low income, so maybe people with low income are more likely to be introverts. I'm going to take those two pieces of data and I'm going to induce a general theory. So it's true of him, we know it because we've seen it, we've observed it. So maybe it's true of all low income individuals, they're more likely to be introverts. And lastly, he might be good at problem solving, but his cognitive functions might be slower. You notice that he breathes in a lot of paint fumes because of his job, and you might say to yourself, maybe fumes from paint leads to slower cognitive functionings just in general. So we're going to talk more about induction next time, but one thing to notice here is that in each of these cases, I kept saying maybe, right? So he is creative, and he is good at problem solving. So maybe creative people are better at problem solving. He has low income, he is an introvert, so maybe introverts are more likely to come from low income brackets. So that maybe is very important. That's going to come up later because observations do not guarantee that your generalizations are going to be correct. On the other hand, we have deduction. And deduction is when you go from a general theory, a general idea, to a particular piece of data, a particular prediction. So let's say that there's a theory out there that says that job stress leads to depression when income is low. All right, so the theory is that if you have job stress, you are at risk of depression, but only when your income is low. Higher income, you're not at risk of depression regardless of how stressful your job is. So let's say that that is a theory that has evidence for it. It's a theory that's been shown to be true. We could then predict what would happen in specific situations. So we could say, for a telemarketer, the theory says that job stress leads to depression when income is low. So a telemarketer has a high-stress job. Has anybody ever worked as a telemarketer? No? It's not fun. One of the things, I've never worked, but I have known people who have. And one of the things that makes jobs stressful is when they're unpredictable. Does anybody know and you have no control over what happens. So one of the most stressful jobs, I believe it's usually in the top 1 or 2. Does anybody know what it is? Is being a waiter or a waitress. Yes. Because you have no control over people's reactions. And what makes it stressful is that unpredictability of whether they're going to like their food or not, whether they're going to like their service or not, things that you have no control over. So telemarketers are in the same boat. They never know if they're going to be dealt with politely, if they're going to get screamed at on the phone. Highly stressful job. So, job stress leads to depression when income is low. They have job stress. They have low income. Therefore, we can predict that if we were to look at telemarketers, they would be more depressed than your average individual. They should have more depression than average because of this theory. So if this theory is true, telemarketers should be more depressed. We know that before even measuring their levels of depression. On the other hand, surgeons have very highly stressful jobs, right? Surgeons are in life and death situations. Sometimes they're pulling extended hours. They have high stress in their jobs, but their income is not low. They actually have high income. So job stress leads to depression when income is low. They have stress, but they have high income. Therefore, we can predict that doctors will be less depressed than the average individual. So once again, we might have never measured the depression of doctors. We might have never measured the depression of telemarketers. But through deduction, if this theory is true, then we can predict for that situation, telemarketers will be more depressed. If this theory is true, then we can predict for this situation, doctors will be less depressed. Any questions so far? All make sense? All right. So, induction, you start with data, you end with a theory. Deduction, you start with theory, you end with the data. You end with a prediction or you end with data. And this is what I like to call the wheel of science. Basically, if you're a scientist, if you're an experimental psychologist, if you're looking for new knowledge, what you're doing is you're doing a constant cycle of induction and deduction. And that's how the science moves along. That's how the field advances. So you might start with a theory, right? So if you have, let's say that you're working on a treatment for depression. You might start with a theory about what causes depression and how certain drugs work. From that theory, you would make a deduction. So you would say, if this is how your brain works, and this is how this drug works, then if we give people this drug in this dosage, their depression should go down. So through deduction, through this logical deduction, you lead to a prediction. That prediction is, in this case, depression should go down. You then go out, run the experiment, you collect the data. If the data is the same as your prediction, then you go back up here, you make a new deduction, you make a new prediction, you do another experiment. If it's the same, you go back up here, make a new deduction, new prediction, you do another experiment. If your prediction does not match what you find, then what you need to do is you take this new data and you make a new induction. If you don't find the prediction, that means your theory is incorrect. So you now have to induce a new theory and you start the process all over again. So you then, with this new theory, make a new deduction that has a new prediction. You collect the data. If that theory is wrong, you then induce a new theory, new deduction, new prediction, find the data. If that theory is wrong, you then induce a new theory, and you go around and around and around, coming up with new, better theories, replacing older theories that don't work. So this wheel of induction is how ideas like Freud's psychoanalysis eventually got discarded for behaviorism, and then behaviorism eventually got discarded for cognitive psychology. It's how new theories emerge and old theories get discarded. And each kind of spin around this wheel gets you closer and closer to the truth of what's actually happening. All right, so any final questions on induction and deduction before we do a little deduction practice? It's all good? All right, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to do a little deduction practice. You're going to get certain information that is can be thought of as theories. So it's basically exactly what you would do as a psychologist, but it's just simplified a little bit so that it's not too complicated. So you'll get certain information theories, and you're to deduce the required information that it's asking for you. So again, it'll be the same procedure where you know about hallucinatory drugs, you know about OCD, you deduce that they should be connected, and then you can deduce the direction of the effect. All right, and that is the kind of work that we're going to be doing in this deduction in-class practice. Okay, so in this practice, you're going to have certain pieces of information that you can consider to be your theories. You're going to be asked to deduce required information, that is the predictions. And the way we're going to exercise this and practice this is with the use of these logic puzzles. So has anybody ever done these logic puzzles before? Has anybody ever seen them? Okay, we got a couple, not that many. All right. So the way that this works is usually you have four individuals. So you can see we got Charlotte, Dakota, Kara, and Violet. And you want to know certain information about them. And that information is asked for down here in this table. So this is not the one that you guys have. This is just an example. But all of these ran in a race. All of these individuals ran a race. And somebody ended up 4th, somebody ended up 7th, somebody's in 11th, and somebody's in 18th place. So we want to know what are the first names. So who ended up 4th, who ended up 7th, who's in 11th, and who's in 18th place. What breakfast cereal do they enjoy? And what souvenir did they buy to commemorate this occasion? And the information that you need to solve this is provided for you in the, in your case, it'll be just directly underneath your puzzles. And what you want to do is you want to read through this information And using deduction, using your logic reasoning skills, fill in this chart so that you can figure out who finished in what place, what souvenirs did they buy, and what breakfast cereals did they are their favorites. And the last piece of information that you need is that everybody is unique in this in these types of problems. So only one person bought the figurine. Only one person bought a license plate. Only one person bought a snow globe, and only one person bought a t-shirt. Only one person likes bran flakes. Only one person likes Fruit Loops. Only one person likes Lucky Charms, and only one person likes malto meal. And only one person ended up 4th, 7th, 11th, or 18th. So the way to solve this is you start reading the clues and deducing the information. So the first clue here, the one who eats bran flakes, finished before Dakota. What information, just kind of get us all warmed up here, what information can we get from that statement? That is one piece of information. So the one who eats bran flakes finished before Dakota. So the bran flake eater cannot be Dakota. So what we can do is we can go down here to bran flakes, and where the bran flakes row meets Dakota's column, we can put an X there to show that those two do not go together. There's two more pieces of information from this. What does it let us, what else does it tell us? Yep.
The person who eats bran flakes can't finish 18th.
Exactly. So the person who eats bran flakes finished before Dakota, which means that they had to finish either in 4th, 7th, or 11th. They can't finish in last. So they couldn't finish in 18th. So we could go here, and where it says bran flakes and intersects with 18th, we can put an X there. We got one last piece of information.
Dakota wasn't 4th.
Dakota wasn't 4th. So if the person finished before Dakota, then Dakota can't be the highest position. She can't have finished 4th. So that one piece of information allows us to put in these three deductions, these three logical conclusions about what's going on. So as we continue to go through that, the tourist who bought the novelty license plate is not Dakota. We're learning more about Dakota. She did not buy the novelty license plate. The one who eats bran flakes is not Violet. Once again, we go to Violet and we go down to bran flakes. We know that she does not eat bran flakes. The tourist who bought the novelty figurine always has Fruit Loops for breakfast. So in that case, we can go to figurine and see where it intercepts Fruit Loops, and we can put a check mark there because those two do go together. And once you get the check mark, and this is part of the strategies to help you with your deductions, once you get the check mark, that means that is that intersection. So the person who has Fruit Loops likes the figurine, bought the figurine, which means the person who bought the figurine could not have does not eat bran flakes. I'm losing my ability to talk here. Lucky Charms or malto meal, and the person who eats Fruit Loops did not buy the license plate, did not buy the snow globe, and did not buy the t-shirt. So as soon as you have a check mark in one cell here, you can X out that entire sub row and that entire sub column as well, because they can only have one. You only get to buy one souvenir, you only get one favorite cereal. So what you're going to do is you're going to work through this, and this is just kind of fast forwarding it here. So you'll work through it, kind of Xing out, getting check marks, and making those deductions. And the last thing that I wanted to show you was that once you have filled in a lot of information, you're going to want to look for places where there is 3 X's and 1 missing spot. Because when there's 3 X's and 1 missing spot, that has to be the final check mark. So if Charlotte doesn't like bran flakes, and Dakota doesn't like bran flakes, and Violet doesn't like bran flakes, somebody likes bran flakes, it's got to be Kara. She's the last one that's left. So look for those patterns, look for those conclusions from your deductions, and as you go through, let me just fast forward this, you will eventually get to It might actually take this long to solve the entire thing. Yay, all right, you'll eventually get to there. And then once you get there, you want to take your information here and put it into your table of conclusions. And the easiest way to do that, might have crashed my program, there we go. The easiest way to do that is to just read across the top grid here. So in fourth place is Kara. She likes bran flakes and she brought the snow globe. Fourth, Kara, bran flakes, snow globe. In seventh, Charlotte. She likes Fruit Loops and she got the figurine. Seventh, Charlotte, Fruit Loops figurine. In eighth, Dakota, Lucky Charms and the t-shirt. 11th, Dakota, Lucky Charms and the t-shirt. So that is how you can solve that particular, those particular questions. All right, so what we're going to do right now is you're going to, let's try I found that the second one actually is a little bit simpler. So let's go to the second one, and given the information there, try to deduce what times did the people arrive, what are their first names, what are their phobias, and what is their favorite appetizer. Try to work together, help each other out, and I will give you some time to figure that all out. All right, so again, on the second page, what was each person's arrival time, what phobia does each person have, and what appetizer did each person order? Yeah, the first one, let's do that one after, if we have time. Just, it's a little bit more challenging, so we'll ease into it with the second one. And you can see that right off the bat, the second one tells you the arachnophobic is Javon. All right, so in the interest of time, just a couple more seconds to finish this up, and then what I'll do is I'll put the solution up and then just have a brief, mention briefly about the importance of deduction and the importance of these puzzles for this course. All right, so we'll call it there. So if you finished, congratulations. If you haven't, you're probably close. But we can kind of double check the answers. So there they are right there. So 7:30 a.m., that was Madison. She's a glossophobic and she likes potato skins. 9:30 a.m., that was Walter. He's hydrophobic and likes fried mozzarella. 10:30 a.m. is Javon. He's arachnophobic and he likes chili fries. 8:30 p.m. is Hannah, claustrophobic, and soup of the day. So hopefully if you didn't complete the entire puzzle, you do have the correct ones in the correct areas. And I highly recommend try the other puzzle as well. I'll put that solution up next time that we meet. And the importance of deduction in psychology cannot be, I think, overstated. It's an incredibly important tool for a variety of reasons. One of them is that the list of variables that can potentially influence behavior is infinite, right? We are complicated creatures. Human beings are on levels of complexity far beyond, almost anything else that we find in the universe. And without deduction, without using logic to narrow our focus, then what we're doing is basically blindfolding ourselves, picking up a bunch of darts, and just throwing darts wildly. We don't even know what the wall is, right? So all of these darts over here, these are all wasted effort. So if you're trying to cure depression, what about increased TV time? What about eating more greens? What about reclining your chair further up than further down? What about washing your face in the morning? There's millions of things that you could potentially look at. Most of them are going to be completely useless. So as psychologists, we don't want to waste our time. We want to help people. We want to get to the truth as quickly as we can. So we use deduction to narrow and guide these. So we start with theories. We start with the work that has been done previously, and we say, based on that, where should we look next? Based on that, what is the most promising area? And you get that through deduction. And then oftentimes, especially when you're pushing the edge, when you're pushing the boundaries of what we know about psychology, existing theories are not going to deal with any of the variables of interest. So sometimes you're going to come up with a problem, and there's not going to be any variables or work that has been previously done on that. So an example that occurred very recently in psychology is the effects of social media. You can't go back decades and look for research on social media. It didn't exist, 20 years ago. So sometimes you're like, well, what is social media going to do? How is that going to affect our behavior? And you can take a look at the research, and there's nothing on social media because it's a brand new phenomenon. So what do? Well, you look at other theories that kind of tangentially affect it, and you need to deduce new predictions. So you look at theories on human interaction, you look at theories on availability of information, you look at theories on how choices are made, and then you say, all right, based on all these things, this new phenomenon of social media should cause these behaviors. So that's what you need to do to deduce those new predictions, and you're going to see that you're going to need to do that as well in our in-class experiment. Because our in-class experiment is on group memory and false memories. And what you'll find when we do our library assignment is that there's a ton of research on groups. And there's a ton of research on false memories. But there's not a lot on group false memories. So we're going to have to take a look at what do people know about how groups operate, and what do people know about how false memory operates, and then using that information, much like you deduced in this exercise, deduce predictions about how group false memory should work. So just to kind of foreshadow what's coming up, now that you know the importance of deduction, it is vitally important that we develop these skills. And one of the best ways to develop deductive skills is to actually do deduction. So I have provided a link. This was printed off from an online resource where they can generate infinite numbers of these logic puzzles. You can choose between different levels of difficulty. So I provided that link in Canvas. So I would highly recommend practice these a little bit, because I do offer bonus points on the exams, and the bonus points come from logic puzzles like this. So there will be one of these on every single exam for bonus points. So that's to encourage you to develop your deduction skills so that you can, number one, be a good psychologist and be able to use these tools. Number two, maximize your scores on the exam. All right, any questions on deduction? All right, so we might not get to the results of the class experiment today, but I do want to at least get to this quick word about inferential statistics. So when I looked at the data, and I wanted to know, were there differences between the groups in how many words did they recall, how many incorrect critical words did they recall, how confident were they, how, for correct words for the critical words. I used a technique known as inferential statistics to take a look at that data. And what inferential statistics does is it takes a look at the differences between conditions in an experiment, and it lets you know, are those differences real or are they due to chance? So it lets you know if it's a real psychological phenomenon, or is it just due to the variability and randomness of human behavior. So the easiest way I found to illustrate that is with the following type of situation. Let's say that you're a basketball coach and you're putting together your team. You have tryouts in your high school and you're putting together your team, and after all the tryouts, there is one spot left on your team, and it's come down to her and her. It's come down to these two players. and you tell them, I want to know, is there a real difference between your basketball skills? So you run an experiment, and you say to them, you guys are going to play each other one-on-one. And whoever's the winner, that's the person who is going to make it to the team. So let's say that they play one-on-one, and the final score is 20-1. All right, so this girl gets 20, this girl gets 1. Would you be confident as that coach in saying that this girl is actually the better basketball player? She is really a better player than this girl over here. How many would be confident? It was a blowout. You better be confident. There's not much more that she could do. So you're confident that she's actually a better player because this difference is so huge. All right, so that's the first thing that inferential statistics considers. It considers how big is the difference between two conditions.
But are they considering that maybe that girl just a better defense than that girl? Because like obviously that girl could have scored more if she was a bad defensive player.
Well, it's one-on-one, so it would be offense and defense, on both ways. But when we get to operational definitions, that kind of a question is very valid. Is your measure actually truly measuring what it is that you're trying to measure? But let's say for the time being that it is, just so we can focus on inferential statistics. So inferential statistics, if I ran these numbers with inferential statistics, it would say that this difference is real because the difference is so huge. On the other hand, let's say that was the final score. Are you then confident that this girl is actually better than this girl over here? No, not at all. Because it's 20-19. One different bounce, right? 1 inch left of the basketball on a bounce on the net would have caused the difference. And if you ran it back, chances are that she would win the next time, right? Because it was just so close, it's too close to call. So inferential statistics would look at this small difference, and it would tend to say that that's not a real difference, that's just due to chance. So even though this is a bigger score, we've known that since elementary school, 20 is bigger than 19. Inferential statistics tells us that what it's measuring, their basketball skill, is no different, that the score is just due to chance. Now the last thing that inferential statistics takes into account is the reliability of the scores. So let's say that the coach takes a look at this and says 20-19, that's too close to call. So let's play again, right? We'll play another game. And actually we're going to play 100 games, right? This is theoretical. We can play as many as we like. So we're going to play 100 games. And on the first game, this girl wins 20-19. Second game, this girl wins 20-18. Once again, small little difference. Third game, she once again wins 20-19. Fourth game, she wins 20-18. Fifth game, 20-17. Sixth game, 20-19. Seventh game, 20-18. You keep going. She wins every single game. She wins the final game 20-17. So in this case, she has won 100 games in a row by a small margin, but 100 in a row. And inferential statistics would take a look at this and say, you know what, the difference is small, but the result is so reliable that it's real. You can now conclude that she really is better than this girl over here. Even though she only won by a small margin, she did it consistently, so we know that she is the better player. And that is all that inferential statistics does. So inferential statistics, just as a technique, and you'll learn about it in P345, it's just a technique that allows you to decide whether a difference that you measured is a real difference or is it just due to chance. So we have a little bit of time to go over the results, so I'll very quickly go over this. Let it be your first kind of taste of what we're going to be analyzing. So these are the results right here. So I'll first show you the results for percent recall, and then I'll show you the results for confidence level. We'll do this real quick, but just so you kind of have an idea of what happened. We'll see this again, so don't worry if it doesn't make complete sense this first time around. All right, percent recall. 0 to, it goes from 0 to 100%. That's how many words did you recall. So the blue bars here, are the correct words, and the red bars here are the critical words. So if you recalled 70% of the correct words, that means that you got 70% of the 90 correct words that were out there. If you recalled 50% of the critical words, that means that you recalled 3 out of 6 of those critical words, those false memories. So the blue is correct memory, the red is false memory, and as you can, and then the other thing here on the x-axis is that we have single individuals running alone, people running in pairs, and people running in groups of 3. So in this class, in this section, we only had people running in groups of 3 and in pairs. In other sections, I ran subjects individually, so they worked alone in their recall. And what this is telling us in inferential statistics is that for correct words, you are actually increasing your recall as the group size increases. So for correct words, it turns out that 2 heads are better than 1. 3 heads are actually better than 2. So this difference here, highlighted in green, that's a real difference. Inferential statistics told us that singles recall less than pairs, and pairs recall less than groups of 3. On the other hand, inferential statistics told us that the difference in the height of the red bars, the difference in the recall of false memories, that is not significantly different. So these differences here are due to chance. Now this is a perfect example of why we run the statistics, because to my eyes and to my human brain, this looks more different than this. This should be a real difference. That should be probably due to chance. But what inferential statistics said is that I'm taking into account the differences and the reliability, the 100 games in a row, and it said that this is a real difference. More people actually recall more correct items. This is a chance difference. There's no difference in false memories across groups. Individuals recall as many false memories as pairs in groups of 3. So, real quickly, that's 4% recall. Good news. You recall more correct information in a group. You stay the same in terms of false memories in a group. But what about your confidence? So these are the confidence rating. Higher bars means higher confidence. This is the confidence, the blue bars for correct items. The red bars are confidence for false memories, for critical items. Just real quick, there is no difference among group size for the recall of correct items. So individuals are just as confident in their words as pairs are in groups of 3. But, and this is the big result here, for false memories, individuals are much less confident about their false memories than groups are. So people who have false memories alone don't attribute high confidence to those. People who have false memories in a group setting have much higher confidence for those false memories. All right, so that's the kind of teaser. We'll delve into this a little bit more next time that we meet. That is all that I wanted to finish for today. So as you're packing up, just a quick announcement that the pretest for the citations and plagiarism is now available. The links for the online APA style tests are now available. And the assignment tab for the plagiarism certificate is also now available. So all those are live and available through Canvas. And other than that, I will see you all next time.